about to quit my job at Sears in the most creative way I've ever quit a job. Working here at Sears, I just got treated like all the time, and in this case I have found another job.
According to the labour market December statement, 4.3 million people quit their jobs in December last year, and that brings the total leaving in America in 2021 up to roughly 47 million. I mean, these are record-breaking stats and show that employees are much more likely to change their jobs these days, which are often instigated by things like the pandemic and fundamentally wanting something different. That could be remote working, hybrid working, or quite simply just a complete change of direction. But the question is, when deciding to make a change, will you simply give your boss the two fingers and storm out the door, or take a slightly more measured, professional approach? Well, if you're unsure, that's why this video is just for you, because I'm going to ask you the 3 most important questions that you can ask before quitting so you don't burn any bridges and then, like Elvis, how best to leave the building. So, if you've been thinking for a while, I quite fancy doing something else, and you've probably seen others leave their jobs to find, I don't know, much more fulfilling roles, and you probably have a little bit of envy. In fact, I would go as far as to say you quite fancy doing something similar to them. I mean, over the course of a few weeks or even months, you might come to that conclusion that it is time to do something different. If we go on the presumption that you know what you're going to do, I mean, it could be a new venture, having some time out, or you might even have a new role secured. How do you best extract yourself from your existing company? Now, one part to note here is to check whether you're falling into the trap of turnover contagion. Now, this isn't a new take on the horror movie with a virus that unfortunately COVID-19 seemed to make almost incredibly true, but it is a new phrase and it's one that I think you should know. I mean, turnover contagion is all about when somebody leaves your team or your company and you start to reconsider your position. I mean, who hasn't thought, I'd quite like to do that too. That's when one person leaving can lead to another person leaving, which in turn can lead to a bit of a mass exodus. I mean, that's in extreme circumstances. But when not in an extreme circumstance, it can easily lead to multiple people leaving. And that's where turnover contagion starts. So somebody leaves, somebody else quite fancies that, somebody doesn't want to miss out, and it can be quite contagious. So that's why being aware of turnover contagion is super important, because are you just being the next person in the bandwagon, or is it something that you really want to do? So if you are about to leave or thinking of quitting, here are my 3 key questions that you must ask yourself before quitting. Number 1, what's your voice? Do you have a choice in crafting your existing role? I mean, what about bringing the parts of the role that you don't like and discussing it with your boss? I mean, let's say there is 20% of the role that you don't like. Well, what could you do to pass that on, or to give it to somebody else, or even remove it from the role? This is all about understanding what you can do to improve your existing situation before pulling the extraction trigger. I know it might sound slightly strange and a bit uncomfortable to say to your boss, look, I really love what I do 80% of the time, but it's this 20%, I don't know, it might be creating a weekly report or having to deal with clients, for example. If you're able to have that conversation with your boss or with HR, you may be able to manufacture an improvement in your situation and therefore not actually need to leave. Now, this is something that can be easily said than done, but actually quite hard to do. So it is worth thinking about. Are there parts of your job that you can begin to hand off or change or even remove from the role before you decide to leave your business? Number 2 is, how much is your loyalty? Now, how much do you really care about the company that you work for's direction or mission? I mean, taking this one step further, what is your loyalty to its people? I mean, this will be particularly prevalent when you're leaving others behind. I mean, you've got to think about those that you have worked hard with, built relationships with, and often been through some tough times with. Are you happy to leave them behind? Taking it one step further, with the company that you're about to leave, what matters to you? I mean, does the mission that you are working towards as a company align to your core values? Now, using myself as an example, I am hugely focused on acting with integrity, and in turn, I expect others to do the same. But I can only work for a company who acts with integrity as well. For example, if I did work for a company where integrity was not one of their highest values, I would struggle to stay there. So for you, what are your core values, and does your existing company align to those? Now, if the answer is yes, why are you leaving? Are there other alternatives? Are there other options that you can look at? And in fact, that might be a question that we come on to next. But for you, core values, are you aligned? For example, Patagonia, an incredible business, one that I would love to be involved with in the future, but started by Yvon Chouinard. He created this environment whereby people want to work for them. It's a sustainability company. I mean, yes, they do amazing things, and I think they're even getting into zero or net neutral carbon supply chains, which is absolutely mind-blowing. But their core values are highly aligned to each of their customers, but also to each of their employees. So for you, it doesn't have to be this big behemoth of Patagonia. It could be a small startup. It could be a local corner shop. It could be any business. But where you work, does it align with your values? And the third one that I've just alluded to is, what are the alternatives? Are there any viable alternatives that you could look at the moment? I mean, what are the options that you have open to you here and now? Are you looking for a better learning opportunity, for example, or a better, more inclusive culture? Do you want more flexibility? I mean, you've only got to Google to see that some companies such as Twitter, and I think even one of the big accounting firms, came out and said, you know what, you can work 100% from home. I'm willing to say that I think that position might change in the future, but here and now, that's great flexibility. Conversely, you might be working for the Goldman Sachs of the world, where they've openly said they want everybody back in 5 days a week. Yeah, that's definitely not for me. But understanding what your options are before jumping ship can be hugely valuable. I mean, ultimately, just by leaving and saying that you don't want to do this anymore, are you really being stubborn and shooting yourself in the proverbial foot? And we've all done it. We've all worked in jobs that we don't like or don't want to do. But really, what are the options that you have open to you? Understanding what your options are is super important, but you shouldn't underestimate the situation if you have mentally checked out of your current role. I mean, I have quit with nothing to go to, and whilst it was the right thing for me, it's not for everyone. I mean, it can be properly shit your pants scary kind of stuff. So, you know, breaking that fear and not having a job is super tough. But for me, it was all about snapping the bungee cord to being held to a corporate job. I mean, really, if you want to know more, please do check out this card here for the video. But by this point, you've probably made your mind up. And if you are heading for the door, then you need to let your boss know. By this point, your mind is made up and you're heading out of the door. But then you realize that you need to let your boss know. Oh, shit. The anxiety will start to flow through your body, and you might notice that all of a sudden something has changed. Now, apart from the sweating, if you don't find it comfortable, or the nerves, this is actually power shifting. Shifting from the employer to you, the employee. Now, it is now how you handle that power that will determine your appropriate exit strategy. Power can go to people's heads, and this is where I'm sure you've seen people burning bridges. I mean, with that, I'm sure you've also seen the videos of people just quitting and recording it, putting it on social media, and telling their bosses where to stick it.
About to quit my job at Sears in the most creative way I've ever quit a job. Working here at Sears, I just got treated like all the time, and in this case, I have found another job.
Now listen, don't get me wrong, it is very, very tempting just to say, F you, I'm off. But I would urge you not to do it. You never know when you're going to need your previous company or the people associated with it. Telling people to F off, flipping the water cooler over and shouting, see you later, bitches, may seem like a good idea at the time, but I promise you, you will come to regret it. Especially if you record yourself doing it. Hint, please don't ever do this. So, how do you do the deed? Well, here are some options to consider. You could send an email. I mean, this seems like the easiest one to do, and it's very much a single one-way form of communication, so you're less likely to get an absolute barrage back from your boss or from anybody else. But that doesn't mean it won't happen. Emails might seem like the obvious choice, especially if you don't like confrontation, but things can be misconstrued. Do you have a clear writing style? Do you get across the point? Now, whilst that might be a negative, a positive is that you get the chance to write it and take your time over what you want to say. I mean, who doesn't like to review and rewrite situations or emails that you want to send just to make sure you've got them right? Now, don't overthink it, because that is also something that can be quite debilitating if you're not careful. You could also have a face-to-face conversation. This was obviously the obvious choice before the pandemic, when we were all in the office and you could just wander around to your boss's office or boss's desk, tap him on the shoulder, he or she, and say, have you got a minute? But this one can be the most anxiety-inducing, especially if you've not done it very many times before. Now here's a tip. Prepare in advance. Much like giving a public talk, talking through what it is that you will say and how you will say it will really help you in that moment, especially if you get nervous and you get tongue-tied. Knowing that you've been through exactly what you're going to say beforehand is really, really helpful. Do it in the mirror. Yes, you will feel like an absolute wally, but talking to yourself and getting your words out means that you won't stumble over them. Please don't wing it. Unless you are a real wordsmith and you've got absolute confidence that you will put across the point of view that you want in a very articulate manner, even when under the stress of resigning, it's probably worth having a little bit of prepare time. Or you could just give your boss a call. I mean, this is very prevalent when working from home and allows you to minimize the worry, especially if you find yourself feeling particularly self-conscious. It will also allow you to control the message or even have notes in front of you as you go through exactly what you want to say. It is all about controlling the message and having a consistent voice when handing your notice in. I mean, my preference is to do it face to face. Yeah, I know it can be pretty nerve-wracking, but I think it shows respect for the company. Your manager should be disappointed you're leaving, but also wish you well. But with all this, there is one thing you need to be prepared for, and that is the counter-offer. Not sure it always needs to come with such a booming voice, but this is a whole new ballgame and one that I've talked about before. You need to be prepared to answer the question of whether you would accept a counteroffer, and if you're not sure, I would recommend checking out this video here where I talk about whether you should or shouldn't. But that's it. Whoop! Making the decision to leave a company is a big one, but knowing how to do it in the right way is also super important too. Considering the best method to deliver your resignation, the notice period you want to work, and the lasting note you want to leave on are all worthy of some serious consideration. I mean, at the end of the day, you might not get it completely right, but if you walk out of that company with your integrity intact and your head held high, you won't go too far wrong. But if you like this video, I would highly recommend this one here, where I talk about whether you should accept a counteroffer. In this instance, I think you'll find it super useful. But with that, have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next video. Cheers.